Every year, Startup Grind hosts our SG Women Leaders Month, proudly recognizing the accomplishments of successful women leaders all over the world. These women are founders, venture capitalists, engineers, executives, educators, and more who represent our community all around the world. This month's SG Women Month is proudly presented by Google for Startups and Silicon Valley Bank.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to an amazing time of learning and an amazing time of interaction. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us, Daniel.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, again.
Morning, Benedicta.
All right.
I must say it's wonderful to have you all here. So we're going to start with Lola. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about what you do at Impact Street?
So thank you for having me. That's the first thing I want to say. It's really, really a pleasure. I mean, for those of us, I'm sure the other panelists will agree, those of us in the diaspora, anytime there's an opportunity to share experience with those back at home in Africa is such a pleasure. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. To tell you a little bit about myself, my name is Lola Yunus, and I'm the founder of Impact Street. So I run two platforms. One is called Impact Street, and the other one is called Lola Yunus Blog. But Impact Street, what we do is we empower African professionals and youth to thrive in their career, in life, and in business. And we do this through coaching, mentoring, and training. And our vision really is to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 8 and 9, which is decent work and economic growth, and also equality. But more particularly for me, the passion is really to empower African professionals and youth because we want to contribute to the aspiration of Agenda 2063, which is the Africa we want. And what drives us, the purpose for creating Impact Street, is for Aspiration 6. And Aspiration 6, for those of us that don't know, these are sets of aspirations that the African Union came up with to say that in order for us to have the kind of Africa we all dream to have, there are certain things we need to focus on, and they've come up with this 6 aspiration, sort of what the UN has done with the SDG goals. And so everything I do is towards contributing to Aspiration 6 in particular, which is about people, youth, and women. So that's what Impact Street does, and that's a little bit about myself.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. So I'm going to go on to ask you again before we go to the other panelists. What comes to your mind when you hear the word entrepreneurship, female entrepreneurship, gender? What comes to your mind, or what came to your mind when you first saw the topic for this panel section?
You see, I believe so much in entrepreneurship. I think entrepreneurship is one of the most viable means for us to create the kind of life that we want for ourselves. Is not to take away from those that choose to go in the corporate world. I mean, that is also a very legitimate way. But entrepreneurship for me, I think, is one of the highest forms of creativity, because when you choose to become an entrepreneur, it's like you're becoming the driver, you're taking charge of your life, and you're saying, this one life that I have, I'm going to have to design it in a way that suits me, that aligns with my values. And sometimes it's really hard to do that in a corporate space, because, in a corporate space, of whoever started the organization has their own, goals and dreams. You may be lucky to find the kind of job that entirely suits your dreams and aspiration. But when you don't, and you have this inkling, this nudge, this tapping in your soul to pursue something bigger, entrepreneurship is such an amazing vehicle to expand your creativity. So for me, when I hear the word entrepreneurship, I think about freedom, I think about liberation. And so when I saw this topic, I'm like, exactly, this is what entrepreneurship means to me, because it's such an amazing way for us to become the best version of ourselves. It's a way to really learn. And more importantly, such an amazing platform for us to use to contribute to society, because when we do things that when we create businesses, we create jobs, we create opportunities. And very, very important is we become an example of what is possible. We show others coming behind us that, you can thrive as an entrepreneur. And that gives them validity to believe that whatever dreams they have is possible. So that's what comes to my mind is freedom. Entrepreneurship to me means freedom.
I can already tell we're going to have a very interesting session today. So, Joanne, would like to hear from you now. For the past 3 weeks, you've been with us on the sessions, but the startup grind as our people have not gotten to hear from you. I've been with you for the past couple of weeks. So can we share a little bit of this goodness with Startup Grind Asaba, Nigeria? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Rare Birds. What inspired you? Why did you start?
Okay. Hello, Startup Grind Asaba. Okay, so I'm Joanne, and I'm originally, thank you, Benedicta, and hello, everybody. So I'm originally from the Caribbean. My country is called St. Kitts and Nevis, but I grew up in St. Croix, which is the Virgin Islands. These are tiny little specks on the map, not big like your countries. My island is essentially a village in Nigeria, not even a village, like, I don't know, a speck in Nigeria. But anyway, so I grew up there, and I've kind of lived and traveled in a lot of different places, and I had a corporate career in real estate and construction. I did that for a really, really long time, like 10 years or so. And that was a really good ride. And then I got to the point in my career where I reached a level where I didn't want to go higher. So I was sort of associate director level. And I didn't want to go higher because in that field, it's very male dominated. So when you look at the top to become a director, it's just all old men, old white men. And that wasn't very appealing to me. And also I knew I wanted to do my own thing. So in July 2014, I had this idea to kind of create a community for people like me we have these ideas. I was living in London at the time. So I went looking for this network and I couldn't find it. So I started one. Now, the name that I gave this network back then was Secret Birds. It was very different. It was for women and it was just an idea. So that came in July 2014. And then I quit my corporate career in December of 2014. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that I didn't want to be in that field anymore. And there was something in me that was building, but I didn't know what. So from January 2015 until for a year, actually, I was in London and I was just kind of living off my savings and doing a lot of different things. I was doing guest lecturing at universities, which is something that we were doing in my corporate job, because in the corporate world, they like to build links with academia and industry, and they send us out to do these talks and stuff. So I thought, okay, I've got these skills. How can I use them to earn a little cash? So I was doing workshops. I had a lot of business experience. So I got involved with networks and whatnot. I started doing lectures. So I guess in a way I was building these sort of teaching skills alongside building this idea. Fast forward, I went home for a year and I thought, okay, what do I do now? So I went online and I filled out an application to do entrepreneurial teaching in China. And 2 days later, I got a response saying, we'd love to interview you. And then I moved to China in August 2017. That's how it all went down. And then as for Rare Birds, in August 2018, I figured out what I wanted to make this idea that I was working on. So I changed the name, I rebranded it, and I changed it to Rare Birds. It initially was for women. I opened it up to all genders. And what Rare Birds is now, it's essentially a platform for entrepreneurs and investors from the developing world. So long term, Rare Birds is going to be a platform that is going to bring these two groups together using blockchain technology. It's going to be, I call it a nation, because I'm essentially building this whole community that's going to evolve around this Ethereum technology. So we're going to have our own social economy, our own social money where you can come in, you can use Rarebirds tokens, you can buy things, you can sell things. Like just imagine you're an entrepreneur like in Nigeria building, say, an e-commerce platform, and you want to find another entrepreneur who's doing something similar. You can use your tokens, you can come in, you can find this person, you can swap skills, you can buy merch. And more importantly, you can gain funding from your diaspora who are abroad. So it's quite a huge endeavor. I'm essentially tapping into this diaspora network for investment. And long term, I mean, I'm starting out with startups, but long term, what I wanted to do is be an enabler for diaspora funding. So rather than, I know there are a lot of people focusing on remittances, and that's great. But rather than just look at remittances, I see the diaspora as a huge untapped potential. There's a lot of research, there's a lot of data. These people have a lot of money, and I want to find a way to bring that money back home using this very safe, secure, trustworthy, somewhat bankless technology that's essentially going to revolutionize the world. And that's, you know, Ethereum and Bitcoin and whatnot. So yeah, that's Rarebirds. That's my story.
Oh my God, I can't believe I missed part of it because network just, I just stopped hearing you.
It's all right.
But
But
okay.
I will say Rarebirds was female focused initially, but I decided to change it because I felt like in order to solve the gender problem, we can't exclude men. And as much as I think it's important for women to have their own spaces, I felt like, okay, how am I going to build this global platform where I want investors to come and give their money and essentially build their economies at home, but only focus on women? I thought the woman focus is great, but I'm not entirely sure it's going to be able to have the impact that I want it to have, number one. Number two, I was meeting a lot of younger men who were actually complaining to me that I'm sexist. And they were telling me that they want support. You know, they're from the millennial generation, a lot of guys in their 30s. And I was really surprised because they were like, you know, we need help. And I love what you're doing. I'd love to be a Rarebird. It's great, but you're so exclusive. And it had me think, I never saw myself as sexist. I was like, how can I be sexist? Am I not the powerless one in this dynamic? But because so many of them kept saying it, it made me realize that the younger generation of guys might have a different mindset to the men in my age group, because I'm 41. And maybe they think differently, they act differently, they approach things differently. Then I also started thinking about people who are non-binary and don't identify with a specific gender. So I thought, you know what? I want this platform to be all genders. I want it to be, if I'm going to be using something as revolutionary as blockchain, then the platform has to be revolutionary too. It has to be cutting edge in every way. So however I can make sure that it's always ahead of the game, that's what I'm going to have to do. So that means all genders, crazy technology, everything. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing.
It doesn't have to be that way. An entrepreneur is usually an entrepreneur at heart. I've started multiple businesses since 2015. So to the young person out there that is thinking, should I go for entrepreneurship? Yes, if there's an idea you have, go for it. It doesn't mean you have to quit your day job tomorrow. No, you don't have to. But you take action. Start with what you have. And if you're thinking, what kind of business can I start in this age where, I mean, look at us, it's the beauty. Someone from China, Nigeria, Kenya, London, it just tells you that the world has become flat. Economic opportunity and prosperity is no longer exclusive to the rich and the royalty. Is available. The abundance is available to all of us, especially when we utilize technology. So if there's a skill, something you're passionate about, master it and learn how you can monetize it so that you can create a sustainable business.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you. Joanne, I'm going to come back to you for a bit. I know you already spoke about how Rarebird started as an all-female thing, and then eventually moved on to being open to other gender. Do you think that there's a link between female entrepreneurship and gender equality? Of course, we know we are in the decade of action. We have just a decade to the actualization of the UN SDGs. What's the link between female entrepreneurship and gender equality?
That's a
Bearing in mind that a lot of people who there are a lot of people who still have their reservations about what gender equality is or what gender equity is, and it's not. But we'd like to hear a perspective on that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that there's obviously different types of liberation for women. You know, there's our mental liberation, cultural liberation, social liberation, political liberation. Women are liberating themselves in different ways. But for me personally, I think the most important liberation is economic liberation. And I have this debate with friends of mine who tell me, oh, you know, you make everything about money, and it's not about money. Women need this and that. And I always tell them, but it always goes back to economics. I'm sorry. It's all about economics at the end of the day. Because the woman who's trapped in a really bad relationship with a man who is controlling her, she can't leave because of economics. You know, the woman who lives in the poor village who can't feed her children, it's because of economics. Everything boils down to economics. So I almost feel as though economics is the foundation, and then from there you can build upon all the other stuff. So for me personally, gender equality, it's big, but a big part of that is financial independence and economic independence. And the pinnacle of that for me is running your own business, not working for someone else. I think you can start out by working for someone else, but long term, your goal should be to make and create and manage your own wealth. And I think that's the ultimate liberation for women, personally. So yeah. And then from there, we can start fixing things. We can get into politics, and we can, you know, make those cultural changes, like, because money is power and money is influence. I get really frustrated when some women say to me, oh no, and I'm like, you know, you're running a nonprofit and you're begging for grants. You don't have money. Everything is about money. And maybe it's cultural, maybe it's how we're raised. Because of where we come from in the world, we tend to associate money with greed, and it's a bad thing. But money is power, money is value, money is influence. And if we don't have money, we won't truly affect change. So that's how I see it.
That is very correct. If you were Nigerian, you will be called an Igbo woman.
You know what?
I agree.
I think I am. I think my ancestors are Igbo people. Seriously.
I agree.
I had an Igbo man tell me so. He's like, Joanne, you are a Niger woman. I'm like, okay.
I
I
can
think I
tell.
have this in me from there, you know. I'm not Ghanaian. I don't have this in me. I'm definitely Nigerian, Igbo woman.
Of course, you are.
Joanne, can I just add something to what you've said? I mean, Joanne, what you've just said now, you completely echo my thoughts. And I love how you're very passionate about, you know, money gives us freedom. But maybe at some point I would like, maybe not this platform or another platform maybe, a lot of us as women, we have this money block mindset. So I personally had to do a lot of work to understand that it's okay to like money. It's okay to want to work for money. For a lot of African women, maybe I think it's because of our religion, where the Bible says the root of all evil, you know, and the Quran, and we're very religious people. So we feel that anybody talking about money, you know, money is something to be paid. So I just hope someday, maybe it's a podcast or another platform, you really need to have this conversation to sort of give women that mission.
We will.
It's okay to want to work for money. It's okay.
You know, funny enough, I've actually had women say to me, and this is attacks from other women, that I'm too focused on money, you know, and when I say I'm building this platform and I want to speak to the men and the women that are building the high growth businesses and we want to get money, I actually have women who feel offended by that because they think that I shouldn't be saying that. And I'm just like, well, what should I be saying then? Like, I don't understand. Like, a lot of women themselves are uncomfortable with other women talking about wanting money, going after money, using money. Like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, no, but I think like what Lola said and what you're saying is very, very relevant to the conversation on what the role that religion has had to play in our how we treat money and our culture around money. I mean, the Bible says, money is the root of all evil, and you're like,
The
oh,
the
no,
love of money, not money.
bad, But then there's money, and then there is wealth. And I think there is a certain element of freedom and liberation that comes with having wealth. And I look at my mother, and she was a primary school teacher. And in Kenya, that means you're making about $200 a month. It's very little. And she was a teacher for 30 years. But then she took out loans and, used a lot of her little salary to buy assets, and she built real estates, property. She was able to buy cars for like a really good tours company. And so now she's retired, and she says, you know what, the best decision I ever made is to build my wealth. And I think women need to understand the power of the independence that comes with having some wealth that you can call your own. And I know it's such a controversial topic because it's a cultural problem. It's not even, and I would say, I mean, the colonialist was a very smart businessman in company building, just come with all these great ideals and, subdue the people towards this mindset, and then get everything that you need to get from the land. If you're told money is bad, then you run away from it. So when they're digging out your diamonds and taking them away, you're like, it's great. You take the evil thing away from us. And then now we're understanding the value of our natural resources. And so I think we just need to keep, and I know what you're talking about, like, Joanne, there's people who are like, you're a woman, just make babies and live happily ever after.
Exactly.
You just want to be on Forbes. I'm like, no, I want to be on Forbes. I want to have kids. I want to have wealth. I want to own a jet. Why is it so hard for me to own a jet? I deserve to own a jet. I can.
We're seen as greedy. We're
Actually,
seen as greedy to want things. We shouldn't want things. And
exactly.
we should want those things from men. Only men should be giving us those things.
Sorry, Daniel. I know you're feeling the pressure.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I understand the perspective, and I agree with aspects of it. Culturally, the world we live in is male dominated. So the structures and the system is tailored towards that tangent. Okay. Then for the women,
I didn't hear anything Daniel said.
You didn't hear anything I said? Oh my Lord.
It just froze.
I guess the network is playing with all of us.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just repeat myself again. So I said I do understand the discussion today and the perspective. I understand the perspective fully. But again, I just pointed out that when it comes to the liberation of the female folks, well, first of all, we're looking at a paradigm shift when it comes to the knowledge that they have about money. And we're also looking at that psychological shift too when it comes to how they have how esteem. Because finally, when it comes to wealth, it has to do with self-esteem to some degrees. So that was my contribution. Okay, Kiki, I just wanted to ask you a bit. Kenya and the US about embarking on signing a deal. Okay, how significant is this when it comes to female entrepreneurship in Kenya, for instance? And what do you perceive? Can the system be replicated in other countries, or and did the agreement take into consideration the women perspective? Can I hear from you, please?
I think the US-Kenya trade agreement is something that we're still struggling to understand, even ourselves as Kenyans, because I mean, you're looking at the US where the income per capita is about $64,000, and Kenya is just $3,000. We don't have that much, so we don't understand how it's going to be a win-win as far as our resources are concerned, and just we don't understand what the move is. And the question that most of us are having is, would it make sense for the country to focus on the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, or should we focus on a US-Kenya trade deal? What value does it have for the growth of our economy? Because already the economy is struggling as far as agriculture and manufacturing is concerned. And part of the thing that we understand from this deal is that we will be taking in American imports. And so we're like, we really don't understand how that's going to benefit us. And maybe the thing is, already there's an existing agreement that's called the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. And Kenya is one of the biggest exporters. I think it's fifth, Nigeria is first. And we export to the US already. There's already an existing trade agreement. So I guess it's a matter of waiting and seeing what that will bring into fruition. The biggest challenge with a lot of these negotiations is something always has to give. And I think female entrepreneurship might be at the top of the list, might be at the bottom of the list. We really don't know what impact that's going to have on how trade is conducted between the US and Kenya. I think there's a few things that have happened between the US and Kenya in the past year. I mean, now we have a direct flight from Kenya to New York every day. So you can go to the US just as I would go to Nigeria. Or it's probably easier to go to the US than it is to go to Nigeria.
Probably.
You know? Because if I go to Ethiopian Airways, I have to go to Addis first before coming to Nigeria. And I think that for me, I think it's a bit misplaced. I think there's a need for us to really focus on, I think 30 countries have already signed the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement. It would be nice to see how that would grow. It's been 2 years and they have enough people who've ratified and agreed to trade with each other. So what are we really waiting for? Should we focus on the US or should we focus on Africa and the potential that we have? It shouldn't be expensive for me to go to Tanzania or to go to South Africa or to go to Nigeria. It needs to be really cheap, but it's not. It's very expensive for me to get, I don't know, yam from Nigeria. It's very hard for me to send tea to Nigeria, but it's very easy for me to send tea to the UK. So I don't know, like there's just, I think, very misplaced opportunities that exist there. I think if we look inward amongst ourselves, there's a lot more that we could gain from a free trade zone, an economic bloc that trades with each other. And it has potential of being the largest in the world. So I don't know what our president is thinking, but I guess we'll wait and see in July what is in store for us. I mean, the other thing is he has 2 years in his final term. So we don't know if it's more of a political move or is it an economic move. So I guess I am 50-50. I guess I have to just sit and wait, but I don't think female entrepreneurship is at the top of that list. I'll be very honest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I always thought Kenya was more progressive.
I think the thing about Kenya is we are very progressive. I think look at the free trade agreement. We were the first ones to sign on the same day with Ghana, and then it kind of set this ball rolling for the rest of Africa. And we have a lot of funds to support women, to support youth. But unfortunately, in Kenya, there's a saying that we have that says, so Kenyans say, kwa ground, vitu ni different. It's a Swahili word that says, on the ground, things are different. On paper, we are very progressive, but there's a certain disconnection when it comes to implementing the great policies that we have. For example, very few women. So we have this, so if you want to conduct trade with the government as a woman or a youth, they have provision for you to create a company and get tenders from the government, which is great. But then what happens is you get all these men who create the companies with women as proxies, and they get like uneducated women or like women who are like in high school graduates who just turned 18. So they just take their identification cards and their tax numbers and register companies as them. and then they conduct the trade as them. And so like there'd be, yeah, we've conducted trade with women in the billions, but really it's not women, it's men masquerading as women to get the opportunity.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so we still have a long way
I
to
don't
go.
even know what to say.
Wow. I know. I'm like, wow. That's all I can say. Wow.
Really sad.
It's really sad.
It's really sad.
And you see, that's like the conversation that now people have with like what you were talking about, Joanne, with rare birds and, you know, pushing to really towards all genders. And I made the conscious decision to move to work with female founders because I'm like, there is so much to be done there.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And,
you know, I must say, Kiki, a part of me, I'm going to be honest, a part of me also opening up to all genders is because the female thing is so tough. I just didn't think I was up for the task, to be honest.
I know.
I wasn't up for it. I'm happy to chip away at the diaspora problem and the investment problem for the rest of my life, okay? But chipping away at the gender problem for the rest of my life, I didn't think I was prepared to do it, because I know that it's like, wow, the challenge it's immense, because it's changing people's attitudes and changing culture, and that's so hard, because I feel like until everybody decides this is a problem, like you said, your president hasn't made this a priority, until leaders, you know, the imams in the mosque, the priests, the ministers, until everybody has decided, and the men, that this is something that they want to change, it's not going to change. This stuff starts at home. I see it with my students at my school, and I'm always correcting them. I'm like, where did you get that from? And I know they hear it from their dads, and, you know, so it's such a hard thing to fight. I really applaud you for taking on that task, because like I said, I knew I couldn't do it.
No, it's definitely like a really tough conversation to have. And I think like you and I, it's very opposite, because when I started, Mama was really, you know, the vision behind it was to nurture, because, you know, mothers nurture. And I was like, okay, that really works. But then over time, it's been more of, oh, okay, I kind of need to, there's a bigger problem here that I need to address, as opposed to just, I mean, I still work with male-led startups, but I'm like, you need to have more women in your startup. You don't get a woman just, you know, much later to, you know, and it was very interesting, because the conversation I have with male founders is, why do you have to hire a woman to handle your sales and marketing? I know a woman can handle your dev, a woman can handle your finance, I know a woman can handle your legal. Why does it have to be sales, marketing, branding, you know, all the fancy stuff? We can also do the, you know, the hard stuff in a startup. So this is more of challenging the existing way of doing things. So and it's sad and unfortunate that Kenya is so progressive in issues gender, but that's what's happening. So what happens in countries that are not as progressive? You know, a week ago, the courts passed a law that was very interesting, that if a woman leaves a man or they separate, the man is only allowed to send $100 as upkeep for his kids. I was like, and the men were like, yeah, finally, we don't have to deal with the parasites who are women. And I'm like, and these are educated people. So there's so much going on as far as this gender conversation is concerned.
But then you look at countries like Rwanda that are so close to Kenya next door, and they're doing amazing things with women.
Amazing.
Exactly. But I think the problem generally is just I would say in Kenya, we have great policies. We have great technocrats who come up with these really nice documents and present them to the world. And the thing is, in terms of implementing all these great things on paper, they really don't go the extra mile. Our priorities are in the wrong place. We have a political problem. A political problem is our politicians own businesses. And the minute that they're the ones owning businesses, they will twist the law to make their businesses work before they can include, you know, the rest of us. So there's a huge gap. So for me, to answer part of the question that was being asked about SDGs, mine is reduced inequalities, because there's existing inequalities in every sector. To import something, I need like 10 licenses. You know, it's crazy. Education, the bias that exists even in the education system, in the healthcare system, there's a lot that has been done, but there's a lot more that could be done.
Yeah.
Wow. Every time we get on these events, I learn so much. You know, the past 3 weeks I've been learning, learning so much. So Lola, we're going to ask you now, what challenges have you identified in the entrepreneurial field, judging from the work that you do, and how are you working to close the gap, or how can we close the gap?
There are so many gaps. When I look at Africa, I think Africa is one of the places where you can be most innovative as an entrepreneur, because there are unending problems. And for every problem, there is a potential for an entrepreneur to create an economic opportunity to solve that problem. Because entrepreneurship at the end of the day is really looking for innovative ways to solve problems. So in terms of gaps, there's just a huge amount of opportunity for anybody to tackle all of the problems we have and say, which of these problems do I care enough about that I can create an entrepreneurial solution to? So there's always going to be a gap there, whether it's education, like we've heard from Kitawa, gender inequality, so many things that we can do to close that gap. So it depends on, to anyone listening, you know, what are those problems that you care enough about that you want to solve? Based on my own personal experience, you know, I share the sentiments of what Kitawa said and what Joanna said. I initially, in my younger days, I was very passionate about the politics. You know, I am a lawyer, so I thought the law was the instrument I was going to use to make a change in Nigeria and in Africa. You know, I get so pained by all those problems we have. And all through my 20s, I was one of those people that would ensure everybody votes. I'll create a WhatsApp group, making sure I'm sending messages. Have you got your voters registration? Have you filled? Have you done that? And I supported the current president as much as I can. I wrote articles. But, you know, as I grew older, I started to realize that the problems that we have is so ingrained in our mindsets that it's not just a political thing. It's not just a cultural thing. The problems are so huge. And for me, I then started to do a lot of self-study that what exactly was the most efficient way to close this gap and to solve some of those problems that we have. And for me, it came back to the person, like who you are as a person. If each of us, you know, I came across a Chinese proverb that said, "Dear Lord, change the world, starting with me." And I saw that quote and I kept reflecting on it. And I said, you know what? How about, rather than trying to, you know, approach these problems from sort of like a higher place, how about I work with individuals? And how do I know? So I created Impact Street with one vision to bring together, you know, 1 million willing, that's the key word, willing professionals and youth. Africans that are willing to change themselves first, so that when they change themselves, they become an example of what is possible. And then they can, when we change ourselves, like we become better mentally, emotionally, we give ourselves economic empowerment through personal development. And then you will then figure out, okay, now that I know what my unique gift and talent and passion is, and I know what my skills are, what is the difference that I can make in the world? So I dream of a situation where Impact Street empowers at least 1 million willing Africans to help them discover who they are and help them become the best version of themselves. Because people that are really empowered are the people that will create the change that we want. So for me, closing that gap is about you figuring out within yourself, how can you become better? You know, how can you become the best you can be? How can you discover? We all have potentials within us. I don't even say discover because there's nothing to discover. What you're doing is you're uncovering the potential you already have. We all have it. But because of layers of culture, religion, politics, environment, we forget these potentials that we have been divinely given. So I'm very passionate, and that's what Impact Free does. I help you to uncover that potential. And when you uncover your potential, you maximize it. We give you, whether it's coaching or mentoring or training. And then when you maximize your potential, trust me, you will be the person to say, you know what, in Rwanda, I'm going to make this right. In Kenya, this is what I'm going to do. In Nigeria, like you're doing that, this is what I'm going to do. And imagine 1 million of us doing that. In the next 40 years, my daughter that is 8, she's going to wake up to an Africa that is like, oh my God, mom, this is a different kind of Africa. And so for me, to answer your question, there's a lot of gaps, and it's up to each and every one of us to figure out how best to close that gap, after we've uncovered and discovered our potential.
All right, Kiki, I think this is where I'd like to hear your perspective. We've had a lot of insight from Lola, similar to what it is that you do with Mama Ventures, all right? So how has that cultural tone to entrepreneurship, how do you see it impacting entrepreneurship in Africa, since you are looking for an underlying cultural approach to business?
I think just as Lola rightly says, I think the opportunity that exists in challenging certain cultural norms has a potential of changing Africa and changing the world. I think for the longest time, most people who are vulnerable haven't had the courage to speak out because they lack the liberation, and they lack to see where liberation is going to take them. I think now that the path seems a little bit clearer, that if I do challenge norms, there is an option. I think initially you could challenge the norms and you wouldn't have anywhere to go. Yes. But now there's places and there is resources and there's people who are out here who serve as a cushion, as a fallback for people who do challenge their norms. I think the lessons need to be more around education, and the approach that we use in supporting businesses is really starting with the mindset. Because if you don't begin with the mind, then how do you build something that someone's willing to buy? I mean, that's what business is about, really. It's about money, it's about people. So if you don't reach the people, then you can't make money. So I think beginning with understanding how people work and where they come from and the reasons behind the certain decisions that they make. And I think as Africans, the biggest challenge has always been the cultural gaps that we are faced with, and the how that oppression has really formed our behaviors. And I think the millennials and the Generation Z and everyone, who's going to come, we have, what do they call them? The COVID babies too. The babies who will be born from 2020. So they will really challenge those norms, because the world is now a global village. Yeah. And I'm able to go onto my phone and see what a child in the US is getting, and understand what privilege looks like, and understand what I'm missing out in the grand agenda of growing up in a world with someone who has the privilege of either white privilege or male privilege. We are challenging the privilege that other people have and the effect that has in our growth. So when I say of SDG number 10, reduced inequalities, that's what I would love to challenge. How do we challenge all the inequalities that exist to then help us get to our destination faster, to then have more jobs, to then have decent work, to access education, access healthcare, put more women in a room, sustainable cities? I think all those goals will only be solved if we do challenge the norms. So hopefully 10, 20 years from now, we'll look back at this recorded video and see whether what we said is true and whether we have challenged the norms, or if has any one of us gone to the dark side or joined the government and not asked them why they're not including more women. I mean, I think this is more of accountability on all of us.
Joanne, Kiki mentioned a very, very interesting perspective as regarding education. And you develop curriculum for entrepreneurship, okay? And you've done that in Gambia, you've done that in China presently now. So how does what you do, how do you see its impact in Africa?
Oh, impact in Africa. That's a good question. That's actually the call I have to hop on next very quickly, because it's actually Kiki knows Harriet. Harriet is doing this on education, yeah. And she said it's from 2 to 3, and I think that's now. I told her I had this call, but she just wanted me to share my perspective on the future of education, because they too are having this discussion now in Kenya about education and the evolution of education post COVID-19. As you guys know, I'm not trained as an educator. I told you I kind of stumbled into this. I see myself more as an instructor than anything else, a facilitator in the classroom. But I think that the continent needs to move towards more project-based learning, skills-based learning, character development, and less away from route learning and testing and that kind of thing. I think the skills, people are talking about 4th industrial revolution. I tell my students about the 5th industrial revolution, I tell them that we need to focus on their character development and their critical thinking skills and their citizenship skills and these types of things, and that it's less about breaking down their education into, okay, I do math at this time, I do science at that time, but more project-based. So if they're going to do a project, they can learn, biology and calculus and physics whilst doing that project. Because what you have are a lot of students who, they know calculus, they know science, they might know photosynthesis, that's fine, but they can't tell me how that is connected to what happens in the real world. They don't know how physics puts planes and, like I asked my students recently, they were all excited about SpaceX and Elon Musk and da-da-da. And I'm like, okay, you guys are all physics students. Tell me how physics helped him to put those guys in the air. They had no clue. They can't make the connection, but they can pass a physics exam. So it's these types of things, I think, how curriculum personally should be developed, but actually obviously should be localized. So what you find in Kenya, you won't exactly find in Nigeria, but if you can localize it so that that will be key, especially since the continent is going to have all the young people by, I think it's 2030 or something. The majority of the world's youth are going to be in Africa. So they need to be skilled and ready. And that doesn't mean everybody's going to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, or an engineer. So, yeah, wow. That's my perspective.
Thank you so much, Kiki. I want to thank you, Joanne. You've been awesome with us in the Startup Grind Women Month. I want to thank you guys for the support. Lola, it's been amazing and awesome having you all the way from London. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope I would invite you guys again, probably this time on a fireside chat where we can have more time to dive into deeper conversations that this has splintered into. Thank you very much. Benny, it's awesome having you too. Thank you.
Every year, Startup Grind hosts our SG Women Leaders Month, proudly recognizing the accomplishments of successful women leaders all over the world. These women are founders, venture capitalists, engineers, executives, educators, and more who represent our community all around the world. This month's SG Women Month is proudly presented by Google for Startups and Silicon Valley Bank.